Thank you, Roz. Thank you all. Thank you for having me. They told me this was to be a 35-minute time slot. I said there's nobody on earth I would want to listen to speak for 35 minutes. So I'm going to talk as long as I can, and then I will take some questions if there are any questions. To be honest, this is my first time speaking to a room full of rabbis. I'm sure some of you may be wondering, why am I speaking to a room full of rabbis? So let me tell you a little bit about my Jewish journey and why I believe I'm standing before you here tonight. I'm Jonah Platt. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. I live 10 minutes east of here, grew up 10 minutes west. And being Jewish has always been a part of my identity. But what that means to me and what that identification looks like has morphed over time, especially within the last few years. I am blessed to have been born into a very active Jewish family with Jewish values and traditions all around me, from my grandparents who were leaders in their respective communities to my aunts and uncles and cousins who carry that legacy on in communities all over the country, to, of course, my own parents who have been leaders and pillars of our community for many years. I attended Jewish day school not far from here through 8th grade, Jewish camp at Ramah, Ojai for 10 years as a camper and counselor. I've been to Israel 6 times with family, with Birthright, with Honeymoon Israel as a Tel Aviv Institute fellow. I've participated in what feels like every Jewish leadership program under the sun, from Jewish Federation to ADL to Israel Policy Forum. My wife converted to Judaism, and we now sit on the board of AJU's Intro to Judaism program, which is all to say that I've been steeped in Judaism my entire life. But it wasn't until spring of 2021, not that long ago, where things really started to shift for me from being a person who is Jewish to being a Jew who is a public advocate for the Jewish people. If you'll recall, spring of 21 was when there was a great deal of violence surrounding Al-Aqsa and the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood and Hamas firing rockets into Israel, all that hot mess. And at that time, I recognized a twofold need within our community, both in real life and on social media, where I do a lot of my advocacy. And this twofold approach has since, with a little trial and error, really become the main lane in which I've chosen to operate as an advocate. First, I could sense Jews were desperate for a way to articulate what they were thinking, feeling, experiencing, for a conflict so complicated can be very hard for people to wrap their arms around. And second, well-meaning, compassionate, intelligent people, our friends and neighbors, Jewish and otherwise, were looking for a way to make sense of what was going on in a way that cut to the heart of the matter, that spoke the truth, because we know it's incredibly complicated. There's so much to take in, so much noise and misinformation, and it can be very overwhelming. So since that time, I have tried to function as a dispassionate, well-researched, easy-to-comprehend filter to help folks make sense of it all, around all the opposing ideas floating around, and to be a mirror for, an emissary of, the Jewish experience. And to do this, my approach is basically a 3-step process. First, I listen a lot. I listen to experts. I listen to voices on the left and on the right. I listen to people, Jewish and not Jewish, all across the spectrum. Then I marinate. I let the stew come together slowly until whenever the time comes that I can feel it ready to bubble out, and only then do I talk. And as you might imagine, since October 7th, the need for pro-Jewish voices has grown a millionfold, and in many ways that have very much taken over my life. So, as I've tried to be of use to folks on social media in my fashion, I would like to try to be of use to you all here in your own work within your communities as leaders and listeners and thinkers. So I'm going to share with you 3 things that I have learned since October 7th. Forgive me if these are obvious to you. They were not to me. And I know that by addressing you, I'm not just speaking to you, but to the communities of people that you represent. We, as a global society, by and large, do not understand what real empathy is. We think we do. After all, we are living in a time of inclusion, of seeking to minimize harm at all costs, of righting past wrongs, of uplifting marginalized groups. Surely we must be the most empathetic generation in history. And yet, if we're being honest with ourselves, Almost all of us trade in what I might call shortcut empathy, or incomplete empathy, or maybe intellectual empathy. Intellectually, we understand the negativity of harm. It's easy to do. For the most part, if we see or read or hear about something horrible that someone else is enduring, we say, oh my God, that's horrible. And it triggers a horrible feeling in us. We feel sad or angry or sick even that that person has to endure what they're enduring. Maybe we hurt because they're hurting. But that is not actually empathy. How many times have you said, I can't imagine what you must be feeling? Well, guess what? If you're not imagining what it feels like to experience precisely what someone else is experiencing, then you're not practicing empathy. You're doing something else. To actually practice empathy, we cannot simply understand the harm that has been done, that it's bad, and feel sorry that it's occurring. That's sympathy, which is lovely. But it's not how you resolve conflicts. To experience true empathy, we must adopt the process of the actor, which is what I do when I'm not talking to roomfuls of rabbis. We must go on a journey of both head and heart and put ourselves directly into the very specific given set of circumstances being experienced with our own personal relationships as substitutes for the people involved. Let me give you an example. And since this is a room full of Jews, and I imagine it wouldn't be so hard for us to go there for our own people, I'm going to use the example of a Palestinian family. Acknowledging that a civilian death is tragic is important, but it's not empathy. It maintains a space between us and the experience. It keeps us at a remove, and you don't build bonds or create breakthroughs from a distance. We need to go there completely, body and soul. We must close our eyes and play out the scene in our minds. What would it look like, sound like, feel like, smell like if I was in my home? Picture the room, the table, the chairs, the lighting, with my spouse, my children. Picture them smiling, hear them talking and laughing, and a bomb exploded above our dining room. Feel the flames, taste the smoke, see the ceiling collapse on top of my children, watching their lives cut short. See myself screaming, raging, clawing at the rubble, knowing I've lost everything that mattered in that one moment. That is empathy, or at least a description of what's required to experience it. And it's the only way to experience it. I think there is a fear to go there, that somehow allowing ourselves to feel the pain and humanity of others weakens our own position or the righteousness of our cause. Something like, if I feel bad for what's happening to them, it must mean that I'm bad or wrong. But let me assure you, it does not mean that. In fact, the opposite is true. For only when we have undergone this vital process of empathy do we truly have all the ingredients necessary to ensure that we are standing on solid moral ground. Even if you understand both sides intellectually, you're being disingenuous in your belief that you're telling the whole story if you've not allowed yourself to experience that whole story emotionally and then make up your mind. I can tell you with great certainty that almost nobody does this. And of course, there are a lot more non-Jews than Jews in this world. So that means a lot less empathy for Jewish people than the other way around. But it's because we're Jews that I know we are capable of it, that we should hold ourselves to that standard of true, fully realized empathy, and nothing less, no matter who we're sitting across from, however alien the belief. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to appear on a YouTube show called Middle Ground from a company called Jubilee Media, where 4 Israeli advocates, of which I was one, and 4 Palestinian Americans sat across a table from each other and agreed or disagreed with various prompts. As you might imagine, it was a very tense afternoon, but I did my best to engage in a spirit of middle ground, looking for connection points and relatability to the people across the table from me. I kept asking myself, if I were born a Palestinian American, can I honestly say that I would think or feel differently than what these people are saying right now? I like to think that I would. I like to think that I'd still be able to hold space for truth despite the primacy of my own narrative and the immense feelings of pain and futility I might feel. But I recognize that I'm a human being, fallible as any other, and so maybe I wouldn't. And so it was in that spirit of grace and understanding that I reached out to one of the women across the table from me. She seemed the most reachable, the most normal. A person who, if she had been born Jewish, would maybe sound like me. And if I were born Palestinian, maybe I'd sound like her. And I learned she lived in D.C., where I happened to be going the following month for the White House Hanukkah party. So I told her I would get in touch when I was in town, and I did. And when I was in town, we went to lunch together at a lovely Afghan restaurant, and we had a really nice time. We didn't bring up anything conflict-related. We just got to know each other as human beings. And I felt proud of myself, honestly, and reinforced in my belief that empathy is not the same as agreement, that understanding does not mean capitulation, but conversation. Last week, this woman posted a video on her Instagram in full-throated support of Hamas. She said, resistance is a human right, and what Hamas is engaged in is justifiable resistance in the name of liberation. I was shaken. I felt sick to my stomach, and I felt I had to respond to her. I didn't do it in the comment section of her Instagram post or in a direct message, because I've learned that's not how you engage with a person you actually care about reaching. So I wrote her a careful, personal text. But before I did, I practiced some empathy. I tried to put myself genuinely in her shoes, and I asked myself, if I felt my people were being slaughtered and oppressed and nothing was working, would I too come to the desperate conclusion that any means, all means are justified? And I could feel her anger and disillusionment and desperation. I really tried to go there to understand her, but I knew my answer was no. And I knew this because I have heard rhetoric from people on our side, people who say some version of, oh, they want Hamas, they're going to support terrorists, they all deserve to go. And I hate when people say that. And so I know I do have a line that I am not willing to cross. But there was great value in this exercise for me because I was able to then reach out to her dispassionately from a place of confidence and security, from a place of genuinely trying to understand and talk to her and reach her, but still asking her, did she really feel these atrocities were a human right? I told her I didn't expect a response. She didn't give one. But I said what I had to say, and then I could put it away without anger, without exasperation, because I was coming from understanding, which gave me strong moral ground, and so her lack of moral clarity did not move me. So I think it's critical we continue to push ourselves to empathize, to constantly ask ourselves these questions, because it's the right thing to do, because it makes us stronger and more full individuals, and because this planet has plenty of hypocrites on it already. The second thing that I've learned is that if we zoom out, the real battle we are facing, not just in Israel or in America, but across the globe, in politics, on the streets, on social media, is a war of moderates versus extremists. That is the grand ideological battle of this moment. And though the extremists on both sides are the loudest, they are fewer in number. We see this time and again in data from all the major polls. And if you get off social media and talk to most regular people in the real world outside of the Jewish bubble, you immediately realize this again, to your great relief. So I make it a point to do just that. I have a number of friends I will check in with. Am I crazy? Am I right in thinking this? What do you think of this? And I'm telling you, when my random non-Jewish friend from Nashville or Philadelphia or New York or wherever is like, I can't believe you have to deal with all this hate. I can't believe they don't understand what terrorism is. I'm so sorry, man. It is like my entire being gives a sigh of relief. And when it comes to Israel and anti-Semitism, most folks in the middle get it. Folks on the middle right get it. Folks on the middle left get it, though the latter have some questions sometimes about certain Israeli choices, which, fair enough when you have a far-right government in charge. It is only on the outskirts, those voices who are most aggressive, disruptive, and ignorant, where people are blinded by their lack of education, their miseducation, their prejudice, their groupthink, and their hatred. I think this is sometimes quite surprising for Jews to hear, but we must understand the majority of people on planet Earth truly believe that Jews are a numerically large, powerful group of white Europeans who share a common faith. That is the truth. That is what people believe. They do not see Jews as a nation or as a people. They do not see us as connected by a single... Oh, I'm missing a page, huh? Lost one. All right. I'm going to have to fill it in on the fly. Let's see. Apologies for that. I don't know how page 17 didn't make it. That's an odd one. That's right. My printer is anti-Semitic. So they don't see us as connected by a single narrative or origin. They see us as these white European oppressors. And if you are an oppressor, then anything against you is justified. Bullying, vandalism, insult, hatred. Not only is it justifiable, it's admirable. That is what these people believe, and it's important for us to know this so we know what we're dealing with. And we also must understand that the anti-Jewish hate, these ideas, images from Gaza, thanks to cell phones, of the devastation, these things are extremely pervasive. People outside of our Jewish bubble are inundated with these ideas. If they're not very purposefully seeking out Jewish voices, they're not getting them. And it's important for us to know that, because well-meaning, kind-hearted, intelligent people may not know what it is they don't know and they're not seeing. And we have to understand that as well. Where this gets us into trouble is when these hateful ideas on social media and academia in the workplace, the ubiquity of these ideas is absorbed by many as equating to veracity, that the fact that they're everywhere means that they are truthful. It's a phenomenon that reminds me of a very poignant line from the musical Wicked, which I started on Broadway a number of years ago. The truth is not a thing of fact or reason. The truth is just what everyone agrees on. So many of the haters I see on social media leave variations of the same comments on my posts. Very similarly worded, same phrasing, because there is no independent thought happening. It is essentially copying and pasting of things they see other people say and accept as true, simply because other people are saying it. So the upshot to this is that these are mostly house of cards arguments. They fall apart immediately because they are not based in any facts. They are rooted in erroneously held, shallowly understood beliefs accepted as truth without any critical thinking. And dispassionate moderates are generally decent critical thinkers. That's why they're moderates. So if we take my first idea, empathy, and we combine it with this second notion of rational, moderate thinking, we can draw the following conclusion, which is the opposite of what the algorithm wants us to know. You do not have to succumb to polarization. Politicians want us to, social media and news media want us to. It is a false premise. We are quite capable of holding many ideas at the same time. There is no real-world impetus to have to choose a side, to be all or nothing. And I can recognize several ideas at the same time. I can recognize that there are thousands of blameless Palestinian civilians caught in this war they did not ask for. I can also recognize that civilians participated in attacks on October 7th and are helping keep hostages in captivity. I can be absolutely assured of Israel's right to respond fully to the barbaric massacre perpetrated on its sovereign land by the military wing of a jihadist foreign government, and also be mistrustful of what Israel's head of state says and does. I can hold both ideas. I can recognize there is a lot Israel needs to do if it wants to achieve peace in the region, and I also recognize that none of that will matter if no other parties in the region actually want peace. Conversations are actually a lot more fun and interesting when you're a moderate, because we don't have the same opinion about everything. And we don't need to have the same opinion about everything in order to engage. As long as we come from a place of fact-based dialogue, humility, and respect, and very importantly, without a need to convince or receive satisfaction, then the sky's the limit. Lastly, for my final observation for the evening, I'd like to finish with something quite positive. Something I imagine you may be observing for yourself, or at least I hope you are, within your own communities. October 7th, for better or worse, has ignited in the Jewish community a fierce passion to re-engage, for some to begin to engage with Jewish identity, as we've not seen in I don't know how long. And I don't say that as a platitude. I have hard data. I mentioned before I sit on the board of the AJU's Intro to Judaism program. And since October, our enrollment has exploded. We literally cannot keep up with the demand. It's actually an issue. We're way under-resourced. Last week, I was sitting with the headmaster of my son's Jewish day school. Applications are way up all over the city. Jewish affinity groups are popping up across industries, at schools. Folks who took their Jewish identity for granted are holding fundraisers, hosting hostage families, wearing Star of David necklaces, eagerly seeking community and solidarity with their own tribe as never before. Many who have been asleep have been at long last awakened to the reality that their Judaism is an inextricable part of who they are. That the world sees us first and foremost as Jews, whether we want them to or not, and so we must claim our identity for ourselves first. For some, sadly, this means further distancing out of fear or a desire for acceptance or an internalization of anti-Jewish racist ideas or Western white guilt or out of ignorance. There's a reason propaganda as a tool exists, and that's because it works. But on the whole, Jews, through no proactive effort of their own, have been made to feel more and see themselves more as Jewish. And that's a beautiful thing. I have seen this firsthand on many levels within the entertainment industry. There's a book called Jews Don't Count by English comic David Baddiel. It is the handbook to understanding contemporary anti-Semitism. If you haven't read it, you must. The audiobook is great. David narrates it himself. It's a short read. It's funny. It's informative. It's really fantastic. And he talks about this basic form of anti-Semitism on the left. And if I could sum it up in a sentence, in a word, it's exclusion. Whatever is right and true for every other marginalized ethnic minority on the planet is, for some reason, not right and not true when it comes to Jews and Jews alone. We are excluded. And since October 7th, a significant number of Hollywood's Jews have collectively decided that it's time to start counting. For instance, the DGA, the Directors Guild, has diversity committees to address discrimination and employment opportunity for 8 different minority categories, had none for Jews until last week, thanks to enormous support from across the industry. The Writers Guild now has a Jewish committee. They did not have one before. There are Hollywood bureaus. Those are organizations that consult with studios and productions and writers' rooms to ensure fair and accurate representation on screen and on the page. They exist for every minority under the sun except for Jews. Funny enough, David Baddiel and I now sit together on the advisory board of the First Jewish Hollywood Bureau. Jewish writers are writing Jewish stories. Jewish executives are bringing anti-Semitism training into their studios. Jewish actors want to play Jewish roles. Jews across disciplines are collaborating as never before, united by their pride and desire to take up space as Jews, to live Jewishly, to honor our Jewish identity. The momentum is very strong. I'm seeing it in many ways every day, and I'm so excited to see where it continues to head. And so, rabbis, with this amazing surge in Jewish pride and curiosity before us, I would excitedly urge you to try to capture this lightning in whatever bottles you have at your disposal. We have an amazing opportunity to reach people who are hungry to be reached, to bring Jewish joy into more people's lives, and to strengthen our community so that this lapse in vigilance, this mistaken belief that assimilation and stability means we are immune from the chaotic whims of our enemies and the scourge of anti-Semitism, and so we need not participate in the writing of our own story. We need to make sure this never catches us off guard again. And if I can be of help to you in your work, let's make something happen. Because if there is a fourth thing I've learned, it's that all Jews all over the world are truly one nation, and we are very much all in this together. Am Yisrael Chai. I found page 17, by the way. It was at the back, but I think I got it. I would love to take some questions, please.
If I were to describe you as a Jewish-affirming person in Hollywood, would you be willing to share, say, 5 other people in the industry? And I ask this because for our youth who are interested in entertainment, I think it's almost getting to the point where we need to point them in the direction of people in Hollywood who are representing.
Totally. So a great place to start is, if you remember the big rally for Washington, the people who spoke at that rally from Hollywood have been unbelievable advocates from the beginning and continue to be so right now. Deborah Messing, Brett Gelman, who's most well known for Stranger Things, he's been absolutely incredible. Tiffany Haddish, I think she might still be in Israel right now. I know she just left for Israel and has been there. Got a lot of flack for it too, doesn't care. She's really out there and strong. Who else has been amazing? Juliana Margulies. If we're talking just sort of on-screen talent, Josh Gad has been very outspoken. Michael Rappaport has been huge. David Schwimmer. I mean, Nate Buzz is great. He's not Jewish, but he's amazing. Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld's wife is more outspoken than he is, but he went to Israel right away, right after October 7th. There are some people, obviously personally, I wish he were more outspoken. I know a lot of people feel that way, but better something than nothing, because there's plenty of people doing nothing. A lot of what I'm seeing is less the big giant celebrity, which is unfortunate, but it's more at the studio level, at the agency level, at the a lot of writers and directors, which is really important. I mean, that's where the stories are getting created. And in the studios and the networks, that's really important, because that's sort of who gets to greenlight what gets made. But in terms of pointing young people, yeah, Margulies, Gelman, Rappaport, David Schwimmer has been really great. And then there's a lot of social media influencers. So Montana Tucker is a great one. She spoke at the rally as well. She's an incredible advocate. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She first before October 7th, she went over to Auschwitz. Her grandparents are survivors. And she did a whole multi-part documentary series. She's got millions of followers. And she's known for doing dance on Instagram. And she all of a sudden came out with this multi-part series of tracing her family's history in Europe and going to Auschwitz, just to sort of expose that to her following, and has been using her platform to continue to do that. I don't know if you saw this, she's the one, what was it? Was it the Grammys? She wore a giant yellow ribbon on her dress to the Grammys. She's incredible. So there's a lot of, there's a good amount. It's not as many as I'd like. There's a lot more. We can always use more help, but there's a good one. What's that? Emmanuel Chikri's great. She's not as big of a name as some of the others, but she's super strong about it. Selma Blair has been really strong. Amy Schumer was at first, and then got so much hate that she had to sort of pull back for her own well-being, which is sad. That's happened to a couple of people where at first they were more outspoken and they couldn't deal with what came after it. She's sort of in the middle somewhere. She's definitely a strong advocate for being Jewish and Jewish identity, but hasn't necessarily been, out in front, loud and proud, and since October 7th in terms of Israel stuff. Yes, please. Hi.
It seems to me like when I think of Hollywood, and it makes me feel like you're very unique in how educated you have been Jewishly. My experience of watching shows with Jewish people in them for so many years is kind of like, I remember, Bridget Loves Bernie or something like that. It was always about a Jew and a non-Jew, or not valuing, even friends, it's like Jewish, but yes, we're not really this kind of, minimization of the beauty of Judaism. Even, Seinfeld also, he's super funny. But I think I just wonder if people I feel like Hollywood's trying to minimize their Jewishness, or negate it in some way, and maybe using humor and stuff like that. And I just wonder if you could speak about that for a second.
Absolutely. So the changes that I mentioned in my remarks are post-October 7th. Nothing that's happened has come to fruition yet, for the most part. Like these changes are new. This energy is new. This awakening is new. So you're absolutely right. I mean, funny to bring up Seinfeld. You know, the part of George Costanza is based on Larry David, who is Jewish, was written as a Jewish guy. NBC said, we can't have another Jewish guy. We already have Seinfeld. So I said, all right, we'll just call him Greek, and he'll just act Jewish. So you're right. I mean, it's absolutely an issue. I spoke at a Stand With Us event, I don't know, I guess it was a year ago, and I spoke, this was way before October 7th, and I focused on anti-Semitism in Hollywood and the problematic portrayals of Jews in Hollywood. I spoke about this movie, You People. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And I brought up a statistic that I believe it was from a Jewish Federation study that, like, basically the majority of Jews in LA are either Reform or completely unaffiliated. And so I think it was like 40% unaffiliated. So if you extrapolate that into Hollywood, a huge number of the Jews working within Hollywood do not even really associate as Jews, or if they do, they have very minimal knowledge and connection. And the analogy I used would be like, so with You People, this was this Jonah Hill movie about the Jewish community and the black community that was very harmful, I thought, to the Jewish community. It would be like writing a movie about space travel, and instead of getting an expert from NASA to guide you, you got some kid who went to space camp one time to guide you, which is what that movie was. I mean, it was really his experience of Judaism, which is complete detachment at all rich white people, and like that's what being Jewish is being rich and white and from LA and not caring about your Judaism. So there's a big issue there. So the people who are awakening and changing are the people who are connected to their Judaism and have sort of been coasting by and not paying that much attention to these things and being bothered by them, but not feeling the push they need to do something about it. Now they've got that push. So a lot of people are sort of like, enough is enough. That's why I mentioned this Hollywood Bureau has come into existence, is to try to stop representation like that from occurring, to demand that Jews get to consult on their own storytelling and make sure that we're not seeing harmful representation. There was a study done that, I can't cite it specifically, I read it, but the depiction of Jews on TV as being rich, it's like far exceeds proportionally the actual number of Jews who are in the top 20% economically, and that the numbers of who is in the top bracket are equal to who is at the bottom, but they're 10 times more likely to be represented as rich on screen, which is perpetuating stereotypes. So we need more calling out of that poor representation, and these steps, they might sound small, like the DGA committee and the WGA committee, things like that. They're actually quite important, because now you're going to start having Jewish storytellers and creators having a voice in the way that these stories are being told and created.
As long as they understand what it is to be Jewish, as long as they understand internalized anti-Semitism and how that's played out in Hollywood, and fear and the what happened to the Jewish community after the Holocaust, and the fear and how that it's like, it's not just they have to know themselves and be willing to.
Yeah. I don't know if any, I think it was either last night or the night before, so you might have been in session, but Barbra Streisand spoke at the SAG Awards when she collected her Lifetime Achievement Award, and she sort of brought that up. She mentioned how in this time she thinks back to the people who built the industry, and how I don't remember what their real names were, but like Eliezer Meyer became Louis B. Mayer, and Samuel Goldwyn was some other name, and the Warner Brothers were a Jewish name. They were escaping Eastern Europe, and she spoke about this directly in front of a room full of Hollywood's biggest actors, and when she had the stage, which was really cool to see. And she said, movies are a place we go to escape our troubles, and the people who founded this industry were escaping troubles of their own. And I pray that we can come to a time where they don't have that kind of prejudice. So, there's an awareness, and it's being talked about more. And, there's an Academy Museum here in LA, from the Academy of Motion Pictures, has a movie museum. This was a big headline. They didn't mention the founders of Hollywood anywhere in the museum. It was crazy. None of the people, none of the Jews were mentioned. And there was a big uproar, and so now they've added some sort of exhibition about it or something. But it's an issue, and one of the things that this Hollywood Bureau that I'm a part of is working on is petitioning the Academy to count Jews in its inclusion standards. So right now, in order to be nominated for Best Picture, you have to meet certain diversity quotas, basically. You have to have a certain number of X, Y, and Z in your crew, on your creative staff, on screen, and Jews are not one of the groups that are counted. So we gathered hundreds of signatures to bring it to their attention, lots of notable names. That's another really great place to look for Jewish names of people who are okay being public about their Judaism. And we actually had a board meeting this week to sort of talk strategy, because to bring up David Baddiel again, this guy's awesome. He just did the same thing with BAFTA in the UK of bringing they're the equivalent, bring it to their attention that Jews were not getting the same treatment under their rules, and they immediately sort of changed their minds. Once he came with some heavy hitters, and they changed their minds. The way the DGA thing went down is they basically turned Steven Spielberg into a heavy hitter for them. What was interesting is, so there was a meeting, and he's on the board, and one of the younger directors spoke up about all the anti-Semitism he had faced in the industry and how he felt he had been worked against because of his Judaism. And Steven Spielberg was like, I've never experienced that through my whole long career. And the guy was like, all due respect, sir, you're Steven Spielberg. So yeah, maybe you didn't experience any anti-Semitism, but we all have. And he sort of told his story, and Spielberg got out of his chair, stood behind that guy, and said, I support what these guys are saying, and the resolution passed. So our approach is going to be to sort of do the same thing, get some heavy hitters, and get the Academy to change their minds. And so things are happening. Yeah.
Can I?
Oh, yes.
Just wanted to ask if you have your finger on the pulse of Jews in Hollywood who are politically active as donors and whatever comes with that. It classically, and maybe this is a stereotype, that they tend to skew more towards the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is struggling right now in keeping coalitions together on the topic of Israel and the war with Hamas. Do you have any insight into where people are being, if there's pressures to go away and hide, or if they're coming out more forward with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, whatever you have to share with us?
What I can share with you is that, again, I don't remember if this was last night or the night before, but there was an event here put on by a number of Jews in Hollywood for Richie Torres and John Fetterman that raised $250,000 in one night. So there is still a lot of solidarity. You're right in that it definitely, Hollywood Jews skew Democrat for sure. And again, it's sort of like I said, any Jew who identifies strongly as being Jewish understands what the stakes are right now and is supporting people like Richie Torres and John Fetterman who are getting it right. I can't really speak to any more than that. I don't know if there are other people being pulled further to the left who would be more, generally in these camps. But for the most part, what I'm seeing is quite a bit of solidarity around these things. We had up here.
Are you familiar with the creative community for peace?
Of course, yes. Oh, you were just asking. Yes, they're great. Yes, I'm. So I don't know if you've heard about these. There's a lot of these sort of secret WhatsApp groups throughout the community of Jewish movers and shakers who put out fires together. Some creative community for peace folks are on that. Their director and some of the board members, and I've presented at some of their awards, and they're great. I mean, everybody involved with that community is terrific, and they've done a really good job. I mean, their forte is the music industry, so whenever there's an issue within that industry, they can help us sort of galvanize and reach who we need to reach and put pressure where we need to put pressure and call out what needs to be called out. Yes, Right. We're talking about a group called the Creative Community for Peace. Their sort of main purview is helping artists who want to go to Israel not feel afraid to go to Israel because of BDS, that they're going to get canceled, like, urging them to go and do that. But they also do a lot of other things because their contacts within the music community are so rich and deep because it was started by some large music industry heavy hitters. So as I was saying, whenever there are now issues within the industry, artists being anti-Semitic, we can use their contacts and network to sort of go to those labels, go to those executives and say, there's a problem here. I'll give you an example of some of the things this group does. It's cool that, I mentioned people are working across disciplines together and collaborating as never before. Here's an example. Teen Vogue is shockingly anti-Semitic, which is just so random and weird to say, but it's true. I saw, this was now maybe 2 weeks ago, they put, last week. So after the hostage rescue in Rafah, that, there was also, as part of that, there was a bombing in Rafah that was sort of to take attention away so they could do the mission. And the way that Teen Vogue reported that event was something like, against international, urging, Israel bombs Rafah, kills dozens of people. Like, that was the whole story. And, obviously that's extremely problematic storytelling, especially to an audience of young people who are the most likely to support Hamas and be anti-Israel, who are the most brainwashed. So I brought this to the attention of this WhatsApp group, and within an hour had, 5 high-level PR professionals all working together, compiled 25 Teen Vogue stories, and you sort of broke down what was problematic about them, how strong the bias was. Out of 20-plus stories about the conflict, only 1 talked about violence against Israelis. All the rest were anti-Israel, in support of Palestine, things of that nature, completely one-sided, agenda-driven narrative. And because of sort of the woman who's in charge of this WhatsApp group is a very high-level person, this information and this letter that we sort of all work together is going to the CEO of Condé Nast, who owns Teen Vogue. So the fact that all these people are awakened and coming together is amazing, and we're sort of not willing to take this stuff anymore. Yeah.
Non-Jewish ally support in the industry, that non-Jewish allies have been coming to your aid or finding that they're giving support to Jews and to Israel and what they say?
It's a good question. Within the industry, I'm not sure that I would say yes. I would say generally yes. I have felt tremendous support. I mean, personally, I can definitely say yes. I have felt tremendous support from people, that I mentioned in my remarks. I have random friends who are not Jewish who are reaching out to me saying, this is insane. I can't believe these idiots. I'm so sorry going through this. And those people exist. I've definitely seen them on social media. There's a lot of influencers who have large platforms who are using them to support Jews and Israel and, truth. But in terms of Hollywood, I don't see it as much, to be honest. That's not to say it isn't there, but it is unfortunately more the other problem of wishing we had more allyship throughout the industry. And that's going to come with time and education. I am seeing more, it's going to take Jews educating folks and to bring them along. But I'm seeing some of that happening. There's an organization I work with called Project Shema, amazing organization if you guys aren't familiar with them. Basically what they do is they'll go into a business or a school or a Jewish group, and they break down contemporary anti-Semitism in progressive language. So, they can go into a DEI space and speak in the language of that space and help explain what anti-Semitism really is. And their main idea is that it's people misbelieving Jews to be this white religious group. And I again, to bring up my WhatsApp group, I organized several private briefings with Project Shema, with some of the heavy hitters from this group, so that they would bring them into their businesses. And so now they've been brought into a number of studios and agencies and management companies. And it's amazing to see the effect that has. So, all the people doing, all those places have DEI employees whose job it is to be caretaking the inclusion and equity of the business. And Jews have not typically counted in the DEI spaces. So waking those people up first to the needs of the Jewish people and the community will have a domino effect, because once those people see it and realize and the light bulb goes off for them, then the workplace can start to change. And so, we got to continue to push for that to happen, and it is happening slowly, but there's a lot of work still to do.
So, okay, so it's a 10-parter. I'm just joking.
Take your time.
So you've talked a lot about Hollywood. I wanted to talk to you about the social media.
Yeah.
Where I see you quite a bit online, Instagram and what have you. Do we stand a chance? There are so many of the outside, we are so few. And what's the goal of the pro-Jewish activist? Is it to combat that? Is it to get the people in the middle? Is it to strengthen fellow Jews? Like what is the goal, and what's your goal? Do you engage? Do you not engage with people? Those types of questions. And how important is that social media sphere for the battleground?
It's a great questions. All right, let me think about how to answer all these. So, trying to solve the social media puzzle, there's like a lot of money and man hours and brain power being spent on it. Everyone's concerned about it. We're definitely losing the social media war. And it's sort of, it's like I mentioned before, it's a pure numbers game. Like, we are way outnumbered. And here's an interest. So the head of operations for TikTok is a Jewish guy. And so I had a conversation with him. And what he explained to me is something that helps the Free Palestine side and hurts our side is they have a cause. They have hashtag Free Palestine. Billions of people can write hashtag Free Palestine. It builds a movement, and then the algorithm picks it up. It goes everywhere. We don't have a hashtag. Our hashtag is like, stop trying to kill us, We don't have a movement. Our movement is like, we're Jews, let us be. So that already, it's like we don't have an easy social justice movement to get behind. So that's hard, that you've got lots of people who are connected and believe in the same thing, but they're not united in a messaging. So even if we have every Jew on earth saying stuff, they're all saying different things. So that's hard to create a groundswell behind. And then you have, we're all individuals, so everyone's trying to attack this their own way. What I've sort of identified as my lane is what I mentioned. I like to try to help articulate what Jews are feeling, because I want Jews to feel seen and heard, and like they're having help express what they have a hard time expressing, because it is so complex to put into a video or a few words or whatever. So I do that, and then I try to also educate non-Jewish people, or even maybe less informed Jewish people, about what's really going on to help them cut through the noise and understand the truth about what's happening. And so the way I do that is whenever I post a video, it's like I've thought about it for a really long time. I'm very dispassionate about it. I base it all on facts. I try to make it bulletproof. I don't put anything inflammatory out. I don't put a lot of opinions. I don't try to tell people you have to do this or believe this. I say, here's what it is. Take it and do what you will with it. And if you're a, genuine, well-meaning, intelligent person, you're going to pick up what I'm putting down. And if you're not, then I'm not really interested in you anyways. I only try to reach people who I think are reachable. So that's another key. There's like no time wasted like going after an angry extremist on the internet. It's like you're never going to change someone's mind in the comment section of an Instagram post. So sometimes, like even now, I'm so much better at not falling into that trap. Sometimes I fall into it just because the person really bugs me, but I'm getting much better at just quickly blocking those people. And there's a nice satisfaction in that because people think there's this whole entitlement that comes with social media that because you have a microphone, it means people should care what you have to say. But we don't care about what every single person in the world has to say about every single topic. There's a reason we listen to certain people. So if somebody feels that just because they have the ability to comment on my page means I should care what they have to say, if I don't like, if they're coming in with something anti-Semitic or bullying or insulting, whatever, they're blocked and gone. I don't think about them again.